Okay, so we're back here again. I want to talk about a few of the questions that I saw for intro. And so these are just two that I picked. And I just picked them. There are a lot of great questions, but these are just the ones that I picked. Nothing more than that. First question. This one made me laugh. It was from Raeann Idol, who's asking, why is prostitution considered a misdemeanor offense, but stripping in a club is considered a legal way of making money, right? So I guess like what this comes down to, right, is what is morally permissible and why is there this distinction between selling your body, like at least the illusion or maybe the sensation of sexual affairs versus the actual committing of like sexual acts, right? So like when you're in the club, right, in a strip club, right, yeah, people, are essentially they're selling, a view, right, is what's happening, right? So I'm selling, like if I'm a dancer, right, I'm wearing suggestive clothing, and there is a performance involved where some people may receive some sort of sexual gratification from it, right? Now, there's no engagement in sexual activity legally, anyway, but in that case, then it's you like that kind of thing or you don't, right? Maybe it's just like something, you want to hang out in, like in a strip club, drink a couple beers, and it's something you like, right? You want to see dudes getting naked, you want to see chicks getting naked, whatever, right? The thing is, right, is that, it's regulated, there's no contact between people, and there's no really, like, risk of victimization, unless someone's, like, getting handsy, then, like, a bouncer has to come in, like, whatever, right? Now, the difference is with prostitution is that, depending on the context of it, right, there are, this is what I believe. There are some reasons, right, why that's treated as a crime or a misdemeanor, right, rather than anything else, right? So the first thing is that, for a long time, there, is this moral code in this country that sex is bad, you shouldn't have sex, and the fact that people are paying for it, is like really like wrong, right? Like how dare these people sell their bodies, right? For profit, right? Especially since, I guess if you are like down on cash, right, that is something that goes with you everywhere, right? There are two things you always get to have. One is your time, one is your body, and if you're willing to sell to make some cash, well, I guess that's your business, right? But some people have a problem with that because it seems immoral, right? It goes against Judeo-Christian values. It's out of wedlock and stuff like that. The other part to consider too is that along this front, there are considerable public health harms, right? You do have instances of unwanted pregnancies. You also have issues of spreading STIs, other diseases, and so if people are actively engaged and it's not a regulated industry, people are paying extra for unprotected sex or something like that. It can be a way to spread STIs. So now you have higher rates of syphilis and HIV, genital warts, whatever, right? So that could be something that could do it because it's a public health issue, right? And also, we don't want to, increase the risk of unwanted children, or maybe you're in a society where you think abortion is wrong, and so you want to limit the amount of abortions that are happening, right? Or something like that. The other part too is that not all prostitutes are engaged in it because they want to be their own person, right? Their own business person. So if you're a dude who's a prostitute or a woman versus a prostitute, right? Sometimes that you're in a stable with like a pimp, and that can be a very violent and traumatic kind of relationship. And so it's not always healthy, and also often used as a way in sex trafficking, so where people are in a form of sex slavery, and if you outlaw it, right, or make it a misdemeanor, you can maybe arrest someone, get them off the street, and maybe divert them into another path, right? Maybe they're dealing with addiction problems, and so they're selling themselves in order to feed drugs. That kind of thing can actually be illustrated in Requiem for a Dream. I haven't seen the movie, I read the book. But there's a segment of the book where, some guy's girlfriend, they really need heroin. Some guy's got it, but he only wants sex, right? So she ends up sleeping with him a lot, really, to make sure that she and her partner have enough drugs, right? And so there are a lot of intricacies of what may drive prostitution, and they aren't all good, right? It isn't just like I'm empowered, I want to sell my body. Like there are significant risks to it that want to be controlled, right? Now there's a debate about whether or not you should, regulate that industry and then, treat it as anything else. and then maybe it can be happy, healthy, and everything seems fine. But that's a separate issue, right? There's a criminal underbelly to all of it that is not so great. Very few people are just doing it just cause, right? Unless you are I don't know, I guess like you're like hustling people on dating sites or something. That's just what you want to do. I don't know, right? There are examples of a regulated industry like in Australia. For those of you that are interested, you can see how they do it and maybe, see if that's something you want to have, like in California or other parts of the United States. Second question, right, it comes from Dyanna or Dyanna Hernandez, and who's asking, why aren't many sexual assault crimes get reported? That's a great question, and something that something that people seem to have, right? Depending on your age and your background and what you think, you would think like, oh, clearly this is something like I would want to report, right? Especially if it's violent, right? Like someone's beaten, they forcibly penetrate you or in some way against your consent, right? That's a terrible, horrific crime and something that happens far too much in our society. So why don't people like report that kind of thing? Well, the first thing is, right, that's a very traumatic incident, and during that time, some people report feeling dissociated from their bodies, right, because they are trying to limit the impact of the trauma to them, right, and so they're disconnecting from them. They're sort of like they're there, but like not really, right, because it doesn't feel right, it doesn't seem right, and so there is a willingness by some people to kind of like forget it, right. There's also instances, right, where the context of some of these happens when, someone has been using alcohol or drugs. That also impairs memory. So someone takes advantage of someone who's in an intoxicated state. And so in that case, then, there are instances where people are like, oh, what I remember, or something like that. Does this seem right? Did that really happen? Am I imagining that? The other part that can happen too is that depending on who the aggressor is, right, maybe it's someone right? So it could be a friend, it could be just someone you met at a party, maybe it's your partner in a relationship. So you don't necessarily want to believe that person would do something like that to you. Or if they talk later, they're going to like, hey, what happened? I felt like this. If you approach the topic. And they're like, oh, no, that was you. You came on to me, right? You totally, like, you were asking for it, and I just went with it, right? And so they kind of flip it onto you and make it seem like that's you, even though, like, that really doesn't make sense, right? Because you have questions about it now. And so there's, like, this doubt that comes in, like, did I do that? Is that something, like, I would do? Even though that's something that you probably normally, like, wouldn't do, right? So that's one aspect. The other part too is that depending on the context of it, right, you have to admit that you are a victim, right? And then if you want to do anything about it, you have to report it. And you're reliving a very traumatic event. And it may not be something you want to admit to yourself. Maybe you feel ashamed or stupid or something like that. And that could be a reason why some people don't report, is because of that, right? Even though this crime occurred to someone, it's really, there's the shame of being a victim, right? Sometimes some people feel like, how'd I let this happen? No one will believe me is another reason, right? Some people are going to not be, allies and really help with that kind of thing, which, also plays a role in that, right? So if you don't feel like you can get help or that someone's going to, do anything about it, why would you report it, right? That also happens with like workplace harassment as well. All other times, right, there are if it's like a partner or something like that, you're still dependent on that person for your lifestyle in some cases, right? Where, let's say you don't work or you are living together, but both of you need to work in order to survive. If you're dependent on that person, it's hard for you to leave, right? Because, you need them to survive. And so you end up staying with someone, who abused you, even though it's not a healthy relationship at that point. Other times, right, it could just be like, the police don't do anything, or, some people feel like it happened too long ago. They haven't, reconciled with it. And so they just don't feel like it's a point to do it, right? So, there's a lot of games about like, where people are wondering like, does this actually happen? Is it something that I actually wanted? There's a lot of like questioning, interrogating that happens before that happens, as well as a lot of fear, right? Or doubt about what can be done about it, right? It's a really complex issue in our society and something that deserves a lot of attention. But those are some. I'm sure there are more. reasons like that. But anyway, it's a really great question. Thank you for asking it, both of you. So until then, I'll see you guys next week.